Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. We have a little bit of breaking news today. Sometimes we get lucky and we get some breaking news on the podcast, as the Portland Trailblazers have decided to fire their general manager Neil Olshey, as he is fired for team code of conduct. I'm reading it right here. They're saying he violated whatever team code of conduct. They haven't gone into specifics yet, but there was an investigation, Sap, that they hired an outside attorney or law firm rather to do, and he's out. So the Blazers are going to elevate their assistant GM to their head GM right now as an interim, and probably be on the lookout for a new general manager. But after a sort of mediocre start to the season, just more turmoil in Portland.
They've become sort of an irrelevant franchise. I mean, I know they have Dame in the world. I think we can agree on that, and a very likable player and person as well. But they're just kind of up there in the Northwest. There's no team in Seattle, so they kind of dominate the Washington and Oregon and maybe the very tip of California. And they're always interesting because of Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum. And a couple of years ago, they made it to the Western Conference Finals, but they're just kind of there. I mean, like, no one expects them to contend for a title. Maybe they'll be the 6 or the 7 seed. Maybe they'll be in the play-in tournament. Who the hell knows? Maybe they'll trade Dame Lillard. So they've become somewhat of an irrelevant franchise. And then, of course, when you hear stuff like this, it's somewhat unsettling because we want to hear what the details were of him violating this conduct, this code of conduct, which sounds like something out of a prep school. Like you've been thrown out of prep school because you were not honorable, or you cheated on your midterm, or whatever the case may be. I'm sure it has something to do maybe with sexual relations or within the organization. I'm sure we'll find out. But yeah, this is kind of unsettling, and I think it's also unsettling too because they really don't have an owner right now. Right? I think at some point they're going to sell the franchise. Right. And the same thing with the Seattle Seahawks. Paul Allen owned both the Seahawks and the Blazers. He passed on. The sister has it. Doesn't feel like she's really interested in keeping them or being involved. So at some point, we've talked about this many times, the Portland Trailblazers will be one of the next franchises in the NBA. And we think that that might be a destination for LeBron James to buy a team because of its two, which is also the fact that on the West Coast, so he can still live in Southern California and be the owner of the Portland Trailblazers, or be some sort of minority owner of the Portland Trailblazers. But it's just a franchise right now that's just kind of there. And until they get ownership and until they figure out what they're going to do going forward, now that they've gotten rid of their
I lost you there for a second, Sap.
Yeah, I lost you too.
Oh, it's okay. I got you back now. We got you back.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard all the points you're making. It's frustrating being that I lived in Oregon for 4 years, as you know, and they do have a great fan base there, who's really passionate about the Blazers because, like you mentioned, Sap, they are the only game in town. So it's a team that is important to the culture there, but right now it just seems like you said, like they're there, and this certainly doesn't help things. And it seems almost now inevitable that Dame Lillard is going to move on at some point, right?
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, they're even with Dame Lillard. Again, what are they? A first round loser in the playoffs? The 6th seed, and they lose to, I don't know, Utah, the Lakers, or someone in the first round, and you go on your merry way. I mean, they did have that run in the Western Conference a couple of years ago, but that was kind of a one-off, and that was a conference that was dominated by Golden State, and they just kind of snuck in and kind of were able to beat teams that were kind of on par with them. So yeah, I would move on from Dame Lillard. Not that he should be to blame for what the general manager did, but it just may be time to reset things with ownership.
Right, now, why is he going to want to be there at this point? Now that they have all this turmoil too, on top of they're not playing well. It's just like it's not a good situation.
No, if I'm him, I want to move on, and I think the Blazers at some point should move on, try to get what they can for him, whether it be some combination of draft picks and young players, and start a rebuild. And like I said, I think the big thing is to get more invested ownership than what they have right now.
Here's an interesting thought, Sap, that came to mind, and I think I heard this rumor a couple months ago. Now that Neil Olshey is out, they're going to obviously be looking for a general manager. Danny Ainge is available and from Oregon. He is grew up in Eugene. He is still very popular and beloved as a sports figure. I believe he's in the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame. Could that be a landing spot for Danny Ainge?
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. We kind of heard that he was going to get involved with the Utah Jazz, knowing that he played at BYU. But again, yeah, he grew up in Oregon. So I think that makes a ton of sense. He's still a respected executive. I know it didn't end well here with the Celtics, but for the most part, people around the league think that he's a very competent executive. That would make a lot of sense. I think that would be a bright move by the Portland Trailblazers, whether it's this ownership or future ownership. It would be a smart move at this point.
Well, we talked about this, Sap, when the season ended for the Celtics last year, and Danny Ainge was not. I mean, he was fired, but they called it, retirement or whatever. It didn't seem anything that he said after that. It didn't seem like he's really ready to walk away from basketball. Even though, again, you highlighted this a lot last year, Sap. He's had heart issues. He's getting older. But do you get the sense that he wants to still be running a basketball team?
I do, and I don't think he wants his last thing to be what that season was for the Boston Celtics last year. I think he wants to make good on that and get a fresh start and be able to maybe build something in Portland. You don't want to go away where you were fired, even though no one said you were fired, that you resigned, but we all know that he was fired by ownership. You kind of want to go to another location and maybe end it better than you did in Boston. So again, he's only 62 or 63. So he's not an old guy. He has had some health issues, but maybe the year away from basketball recharges the batteries. He takes care of his health, and he goes back and becomes a general manager or president of basketball operations or whatever fancy title they want to give him. And that would be his last stop. And if he does it for half a dozen years, then he can go play as much golf as he needs to.
It does seem sort of like a natural fit. I mean, unless the guy who they just elevated as their interim GM, Joe Cronin, who I've never heard of, but I don't make a habit of learning all the assistant GMs in the NBA.
Joe Cronin. Actually, Joe Cronin was actually manager of the Boston Red Sox like 100 years ago. I think he's the manager. Well, that's good. So could be him. He's an old guy. Joe Cronin, I believe, might have been the manager of the Red Sox when Babe Ruth played for them or whatever. Maybe played with
career.
Babe Ruth. Yeah. And now he's in Portland trying to fix the Blazers. Here we are 100 years later. In fact, that Joe Cronin's like a name of like probably 3 kids I went to high school with, going to Somerville High. It was predominantly like Irish or Italian. So there's probably like 2 or 3 Joe Cronins that I went to high school with.
And you don't think it's one of them?
I don't think it's one of them. No,
right
I don't. Although we did have someone in high school that I went with that was like trying to work his way into, at the time, the Seattle Supersonics. And he kind of put forth that he was a general manager or an executive with the Seattle Supersonics. He clearly wasn't, but he kind of milked it for as much as he could, almost like Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can, like this.
So he was a con man, is what you're saying.
He was a con, absolutely. His name was Ronnie Craven, who played on the high school basketball team, a few years younger than me. Big, tall guy, about 6'7". So the connection with basketball made sense, right? He played in high school. He was decent. I think he played maybe Division III college, and kind of put forward that he was the assistant general manager of the Supersonics. I'm going back like when they were in Seattle, so at least 15 years ago. So that was my connection to a potential executive from Somerville High, and maybe Joe Cronin, who I went to school with, or Joe Cronin, who managed the Red Sox like 100 years ago.
It's an intriguing, mysterious position now.
It's a great name, Joe Cronin, right? It's pretty basic.
There you go. It's a John Doe. Is running the Trailblazers. But yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know how old he is. I don't know if he is indeed the guy who managed the Red Sox, then he's 150. But maybe he's some sort of wonderkind, and he's a perfect fit for the Trailblazers. But I think that the Danny Ainge thing is certainly something to keep an eye on because of that Oregon connection, because of how like you said, how it ended in Boston, that he wants to continue. It wasn't because he retired because of his age or his health. It was because they forced him out. And so we know this about Danny Ainge, Sap, right? He's a very, very competitive person.
Very
And
competitive.
so I find it hard to imagine that he's just like, yep, okay, this was my legacy as a general manager and I'm happy and retired now. It just doesn't seem likely. So kind of going home, doing it for however many years, I think the Blazers would welcome it. As far as workplace hostility, the Celtics had no problems with that with Danny Ainge. It seemed like everything worked well in the Celtics front office in terms of, they had a lot of people move on to be general managers of other teams, so maybe that helps the culture there. I don't know, but it does seem like something that's worth keeping an eye on.
The only pushback I would have, Jet, is remember towards the end of his stay in Boston.
That's true.
I think the black players may push back a little bit against Danny Ainge because remember he was at a forum and he was asked about players getting involved with social issues and he kind of pushed back on that, whether it be Colin Kaepernick or LeBron James. He's like, yeah, I don't listen to them about that stuff. I don't know if that's, in fact, I'm going to take that back. It doesn't sit well with black players in the league. So if he becomes a general manager, the black players on Portland kind of push back and say, why do we hire this guy? So that's the only thing. And it would be kind of interesting that, Danny Ainge would be the potential executive with Portland. You got Chauncey Billups as his coach. Now they were never connected in Boston because it was Rick Pitino who drafted Chauncey Billups 3rd overall and decided to trade him like 3 months later or 3 months into the season, which made no sense. But yeah, that could be the only pushback, Jet, is that some of the black players, in fact, I'm sure most would be like, we're not too crazy about Danny Ainge because of some of these comments he had said years earlier.
Yeah, and we don't really know who's in charge of the hiring process there either, because
Paul Allen's sister,
sort of an absentee
she doesn't want to get involved with that, right? Yeah.
So
I think they need to straighten out ownership at some point. And again, LeBron James makes a ton of sense there, but he can't buy the team until he retires.
Right. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Also, one last note about it, Sap. When Danny Ainge took over the Celtics, they had 2 All-Stars, Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce. He blew the whole thing up, kept Pierce, but sort of started from scratch. The Blazers have McCollum's not an All-Star, but they have basically the same sort of setup, 2-star-ish players. Maybe he does the same thing and trades away one of them, trades away both, starts from scratch. We've seen that he has the ability to hit picks that are really, really high in the draft. So if they go full tank mode and he takes over, maybe his track record of drafting well in the top 3 is something that's interesting for the Trailblazers. I don't know.
It could be.
Sort of putting it out there.
I'm going to throw one other potential owner, and it kind of ties into LeBron James. We know Fenway Sports Group, which owns the Red Sox, also owns Liverpool in the EPL, but now is a minority owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Right.
Maybe Fenway Sports Group decides to buy a basketball team, and the Portland Trailblazers may be the next one to be up for sale. They could
at that point, would LeBron have to divest from the group?
He might have to. Yeah, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have the face of the NBA own 2% of one of the teams that he competes against. That would be a bit strange, but yeah, maybe divest himself of that, and then when he retires, pull back in. I'm sure these are all things that will get weighed upon over the next several years.
Yeah, but it's definitely the Blazers now with Neil Olshey out because of things they won't really get into, but workplace violation. I'm sure something will leak. But yeah,
I don't think he used the copy machine inappropriately. I'm going to guess that's not one of the things that got him fired. Makes sense that he did. Yeah, I mean, unless it's Marge Schott that used to own the Cincinnati Reds that was a penny pincher and probably would fire someone if they, made too many copies of something. So yeah, I think it had something to do with something else. So, but I'm sure we'll find out.
Yep. So that's, some of the breaking news for you. We keep an eye on everything that's going on in Portland now throughout the season, especially with the in the middle of this month, players who were signed can now be traded. So I would expect Portland to be a team that's going to be fielding a lot of offers with all the turmoil in there. A lot of people try to take advantage when that sort of happens. So we will continue to keep an eye on Portland. But Sep, 2 teams we don't usually talk about at all played last night, and a game we would not normally pay any attention to was the Oklahoma City Thunder and Memphis Grizzlies. The sole reason we're going to talk about it right now is because in the NBA's 75th season, that game set a new record, and that record is the largest margin of victory in NBA history, as the Memphis Grizzlies, I don't know what the word is for this win that they had. They won 152-79, a 73-point margin of victory, the greatest single margin of victory in the history of the National Basketball Association.
That's 18 points per quarter. That's 1.5 points per minute. It almost doesn't seem possible, right? And again, you have the perfect storm of Memphis lighting it up on offense and OKC not being able to buy a basket. Like if you see a team score over 150 points, usually the other team gets 110, 120 because it's garbage time early and, they're able to get some stats, to look good for them. That didn't happen in that game last night. I believe Memphis had 10, 11 players in double figures, and they did that without their best player, Ja Morant, who's out right now.
That's the most funny part about it. He wasn't
right.
playing. In this game.
And it's a middle of the road team. I mean, if you saw Golden State do this in a given night, or Brooklyn when, say, Durant couldn't miss, which seems to be most every game, and Harden was all in, and if Kyrie was back, and you'd say, well, Brooklyn went out and scored 150 plus points, you could believe that, although I don't think Brooklyn would hold the team into the 70s. Like it just doesn't make any sense other than Memphis couldn't miss and OKC couldn't buy a basket. And again, they're bereft of talent, the Thunder. So you're going to see this from time to time. And then again, in the NBA with the 3-point shot being so prominent, sometimes you see these wide margins of victory. You also see big comebacks. You'll see teams get down 26 and come back and win because the 3-point shot has made a 26-point lead feel more like a 17 or an 18-point lead at a given moment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you win a game by 73 points, a lot of things go right for you. And the Grizzlies, like you mentioned, they had 9 guys in double figures.
9 guys,
including 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of their bench players scored in double figures. This game has the best plus minus column that I've ever seen in my life. You had just a couple highlights, Sap, of some of the starters for the Thunder: -53, -56, -47, -44, and -32. And then for some of the starters for some of the players for the Grizzlies, +42, a +42, a +39, a +52, a +46. Just like that. Usually these are like plus or minus like 7, so
right.
It just it was a crazy game that obviously was not on anybody's radar because it's Memphis, Oklahoma City, 2 of the teams that have probably they're in the smallest markets in the NBA. And like you said, no Ja Morant, so it's not like, oh, I'm going to tune in and watch this guy play. And yet in our 75th season, Sep, we have a new record for margin of victory, and it was this game of all games. Just wild. Yeah, 31 points in the first quarter, 41 points in the second, 41 in the third, 39 in the fourth for Memphis, 16, 20, 26, and 17 for Oklahoma City, and resulted in a historic blowout. How do you recover from a 73-point loss?
Come back the next night or the next game and win by 2, and you go 1-1, and you've been outscored by over 70 points. I mean, you can't really have a slaughter rule in basketball. I mean, we used to have it in softball. You'd have like one team that was clearly better than the other, and if they got up by like 15 runs after 5 innings, we just call it a day at that point. And again, softball, baseball, they don't have a clock. Basketball has a clock. I didn't see any way that OKC is ever going to come back from that within the game, and it just grew. It just kept growing and growing and growing. Yeah, sometimes you'll see a team get up by 30, they take it off the, take the foot off the gas, and the other team makes a little run and ends up losing by 16, and it doesn't look that bad. This thing just kept going in the same direction for all 48 minutes. And, this is the first time that we're talking about Memphis and OKC for the most part, other than when they play like the Celtics or the Lakers or the Nets or, any of the high profile teams. So good for them. Good for Memphis and bad for OKC. But yeah, I just kept looking at that score going, that almost feels like Cheryl Miller in high school. Like those were the kind of scores that she had.
You see that sometimes especially in women's high school basketball for whatever reason.
Yeah.
You'll see like it's 100 to like 8. the game ends up being, and then the coach and the players get in trouble because they're like, well, that wasn't good sportsmanship. But this is professional basketball,
Cheryl Miller scored 100.5 once. It was like, Will Chamberlain needed a whole game to score 100. Cheryl Miller scored 100.5. Yeah, you see that in high school girls. I mean, you might see that occasionally in high school boys when, a truly great prospect is just head and shoulders above everybody, a man among boys. You don't even see that much in college,
no,
say
not really.
Duke or Kentucky when they had 5 guys that are going to go in the first round as freshmen taking on some poor team that's just going to
they won by play 30, not 70.
30, yeah. And some poor team is just going to play Duke or Kentucky to cash a check.
Or it's like when the Dream Team played, Sap, right? What were some of the margins of victory?
Oh my God!
Would they play Senegal in the first round? Or Angola.
Yeah, the average margin of victory was 41 points in the 92 Dream Team. I mean, it was such an embarrassment for the rest of the world, but actually none of those teams felt bad about it because no one expected them to even play close to the United States. In fact, there were just games that I remember where, Barkley's posting up some poor guy from Angola, and the guy from Angola is like, take a picture. I want to have this blown up. Charles Barkley's, posted me up, or Michael Jordan just flew over me to dunk. So yeah, that's kind of the feel you got for this game. But these are 2 NBA teams. And like I said, Memphis is middle of the road without their best player. And OKC's not very good, but they did beat the Lakers twice this year after getting down 26 and 19 on 2 separate occasions. So it's not like they're the worst team in basketball. I bet you the
spread before this game was probably 4.
Right? Yeah, it was one of those games. Again, like you said, even if you had league pass, you're not watching this game. There's other games that you're going to watch rather than this. Fortunately for TNT or ESPN, they weren't stuck with this on a given night. So, they didn't have to, at some point, start filling from the middle of the second quarter on. Imagine
not an ideal broadcast.
I'll tell you, Jet, Chris Villani and I, when we were all at 15-10, we used to do the Boston Militia women's football games. Every game was like that. It was 56-0 at halftime of most games.
Were the Militia the team that was on the right or the wrong end of that?
The right end of the score, and it was brutal. I mean, we'd spend this really from the middle of the second quarter on, or from the start of the second quarter on, just filling. Telling jokes or whatever. I remember one time I was doing a game, and I think I was doing it by myself. Which, think about that. And they were up 64-7. They gave up a touchdown. And there was 2 minutes left in the game. And I'm I said this on the air, let's just go to a running clock at this point. Let's get out of here before someone gets hurt. And 2 of the coaches, the assistant coaches who were on the headsets were 8 to 12 feet away from me, started yelling at me. We play to the final whistle. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay,
relax.
I relax. It's 64-7. I'm exhausted at this point because I did the game alone. What can you say in a 64-7 game, which was, a slaughter from the beginning of the game? I mean, I'm up here just trying to fill as much time. And during that game, with about 4 minutes left, someone got knocked out. I mean, the Militia had offensive linemen. These women were 6'3", 260. They were huge. And this poor team they were playing, they just literally steamrolled them. There was one where they had a pulling guard, and she just leveled the cornerback, who probably weighed 110 pounds.
I was going to say, what was it, the Everett High School powder puff team?
Yeah, it was even worse than that. Yeah, I mean, and this poor cornerback was literally knocked out. They had to call an ambulance. And Jesus. I'm filling, and I'm trying to tell the guys back at, Master Control, let's just go to 7 minutes of breaks. I mean, do we have something we can fill in here? There's only so many ways I can talk about how the 6'3", 260-pound woman destroyed the 110-pound cornerback, who hopefully is not dead. And I'm like, this is not really what I wanted to do in life, but you know what? The boss asked me and Chris to do these games, so we cooperated.
So if you're a member of the Oklahoma City coaching staff or something, I think you take the film, you burn it.
Oh yeah.
And you never speak about it again, and then you
absolutely
move on.
Yeah.
You can't learn anything from that.
No, you don't even want to have that in their memory. Just erase that as quickly as you can and move on to the next game.
Yep. All right, Sap. The final story we're going to talk about today, it concerns your guy, LeBron James. Looked like he was going to miss 10 days with a positive COVID test, but not so fast, my friends, as Lee Corso would say.
Yes.
LeBron has now turned in, I believe, 2 negative tests. Oh no, sorry, 8 negative tests. Way more than 2. Why 8? Is that an arbitrary number?
Well, that's how many titles he's going to end up with, because I
Oh,
have a lot of
come
confidence
on.
he's going to win 4 more over the next 4 years. No, I don't know where they came up with that. I thought it would be fewer than that, but
he's good to go now.
He's good to go, and it's good because the Celtics play the Lakers early next week, and we want to see that. Yeah, it's just a weird thing. I mean, was it a false positive that led to him being in the protocol? And then it had to be, right? So this just goes back to my point every time something comes up about COVID, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Antonio Brown or LeBron James or whoever. I don't think we know. I mean, look,
well, 2 of those guys are a-holes. You know, LeBron, I'm not my favorite guy, but don't put him in the same category as those 2 guys.
Well, A-Rod's my guy. I mean, he's
he's a sap. I don't
want to talk about him with you anymore. Yes.
Yeah, but that is I told you, a toxic relationship.
It is
LeBron James, not my favorite guy, and I'm going to defend him right now. Don't put him in the same category as Aaron Rodgers.
Well, but my point being, I don't think anybody knows anything. Like I'm vaccinated. I'm about to get my booster. I got to get the flu shot. You know, all that stuff. I got my pneumonia shot. So I'm all set. But I don't like false positives. Like when that's in the equation, it's almost like, okay, he tested positive. He's in the protocol, but did he? And then you're trying to figure out what to do. I mean, we even saw this the other night when Giannis and LaMelo Ball were exchanging jerseys, and because Giannis, who's not that guy that generally exchanges jerseys with players, he's not like the rest of the league or most of the league that has this fraternity. He kind of likes being the outsider who kind of crashed the party and is the best player in the world. Well, he and LaMelo had a great matchup the other night. It was like who can top each other, and finally Giannis won. And they exchanged jerseys the other night, and then the league took LaMelo's jersey away from Giannis because of health and safety. You let the guys play, but you don't let them take each other's jerseys.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
But that's my thing is that it's a little bit crazy. I don't like that sounds. Look, I'm very, very cautious. I think the best way to avoid this thing is to just not be around people. Well, that's not possible if you're an NBA player. You're on the court with 9 other dudes crashing into each other, sweating, you're sharing a plane with 12 to 14 other guys, a coaching staff, riding on a bus. I mean, you're going to be in contact with people. So yeah, that was kind of weird because and Giannis was kind of disappointed. He respects the hell out of LaMelo. He wanted his jersey. LaMelo wanted his jersey. And I don't know if they've taken Giannis's jersey away from LaMelo. Probably they have.
What they do?
That was just a weird story. I don't know. They
burn it.
Yeah. And then Giannis is like, I'm going to have to send him another jersey, not game worn, and the same thing. It's like, seems a little bit complicated, but you let them play and they've constantly testing, but then the jersey becomes an issue. I mean, I remember when the, AIDS scare back in the early 90s, if a player bled, they had to come out of the game. They had to change their uniform.
They still do.
They
have to come
still
out of the game.
Right. The trainer on the side, was wearing gloves, and it was just, and again, I'm all for being cautious, but with that, I'm not sure where they went with that. But as far as LeBron, yeah, it's good that he gets back in there playing. The Lakers need him.
We talked about that the other day, right, Sap? How important is it that he develops chemistry with the other guys who are on the team?
He has to. And I'm sure Anthony Davis is like, oh, good, I don't have to be the main guy tonight because I don't want to be that guy. I'm very comfortable being, Robin to Batman, and Westbrook. I don't know what you classify him as, the Riddler or the Joker. I mean, he's like this diabolical guy who sometimes gets in the way and crashes the party. But yeah, it's good to see LeBron back. It was just a weird thing, but he did tweet out the other day, something's fishy, and he had all the different emojis, and that would lead me to believe that it had to do with these false positives and whatnot.
Yeah, but at the same, I mean, the NBA.
You never know. You never know what he's tweeting anyway.
Doesn't want him to miss time. No. I mean, they're not going to be fake up positive tests for him.
The last guy in the world that you'd want to do that to. And even the NFL doesn't want to have Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady miss games. I mean, or Patrick Mahomes. They're, the 3 biggest stars in the sport. So yeah, you don't want to have LeBron out. I think LeBron's still pissed that he got suspended 1 game for his fracas.
He was not happy about
Isaiah
that.
Stewart. And look, I think he kind of deserved it, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think, God forbid we bring nuance to the conversation. I mean, it was the Rashomon effect, as we talked about. And again, we're the only podcast I know that does sports that can also reference the Rashomon effect. But, some people had him standing to Isaiah Stewart and literally punching him 6 times in the eye. Those are the LeBron haters. And then the LeBron lovers are like, no, he didn't do anything. And I'm like, well, it's somewhere in the middle there. Sorry. Yeah, I guess he deserved a 1-game suspension. And LeBron thought he got the 1-game suspension because of the way Isaiah Stewart reacted afterwards. And he got a 2-game suspension. So, I mean, maybe LeBron just was pissed that he got that 1-game suspension. And now that this whole COVID thing was kind of botched, he's like, yeah, something's fishy. What's going on here? But again, this leads me all back to my first point, like a half hour ago, it seems like. I don't think we know. Like, is this still uncharted territory right now when it comes to this virus, and what exactly we're doing to combat it? So that's, heightened when you're dealing with the biggest star in the NBA. And now we see that he comes back.
Yeah. Without a doubt, it's heightened. And, I think the biggest question in this isn't, or the biggest story in this isn't that he's coming back, but that, what exactly happened. There was a positive, and then said, actually, you know what? I don't really feel sick. I'm going to try taking a test. Oh, it's negative. The NBA said, okay, that's great. Try again. All right, this one's negative. All right, 5 more times or 6 more times, and you're good to go. So what? He just kept spitting or rubbing his nose and saying,
my nose
negative.
is hurting. The poor guy's nose was probably bleeding.
Keep going.
At that point. Yeah,
got to get 8 of them.
Got to shove that swab up your nose. I remember at the beginning of this when there was a tiger at the New York Zoo that had COVID. I'm like, who gets the job of sticking a swab up a tiger's nose? Like,
Someone
I don't think
death row.
Yeah, because the tiger's not going to take too well to that. And when the tiger doesn't take too well to that, he may just, swat you and your head comes off your neck. So, I don't want that job, swabbing a tiger.
I want the behind the scenes here, Seth. That's what I want is, okay, so the NBA, right? What was the sequence of events? NBA said, hey, because they have regular COVID testing, right? So they said, hey, you tested positive. And then he said, what did he say? Come back and say, no, I feel fine. And he said, well,
which you can feel fine and be positive. I mean, that's.
So he was just so confident that they were wrong that he submitted a test. It was negative. And what they say to him? Sorry, we still believe ours. And so he said, okay, I'm going to do 7 more of these to prove my point.
Wow.
Like,
he's pretty persistent.
I just want to know. I want to know why it took 8 of them for. It's not. It's not just a LeBron James thing. Like, is this what every player would have to go through if they test positive and it's a false positive? They had to submit 8 of these. Like, that doesn't seem to make sense either. So it's the protocols are all, like you said, they're confusing. No one seems to really understand them. They're not any better across. It's not an NBA issue. It's all these sports have this issue. So
it's life. It's everything. Yeah. I mean, it's all of us. I mean, when do you wear a mask? When do you not wear a mask? There's so many things that we're still learning here, and everybody seems to be an authority on this. And I don't think anyone's an authority. I mean, I listen to the CDC. That's, in my opinion, the one to go to. But I think they're still trying to find their way about this. With the vaccine and
Seth, keep in mind,
all those things.
2 years ago, or 2 years and a handful of months, we didn't even know this thing existed.
Right. Yeah. No, this is new, and there's variants. And I know that they were working on vaccines for years, like they normally do. And I look, this is what they've come up with, and just look at the mortality rates have gone down since the vaccine became available.
Right.
By that token, I think it's worked, right? I mean, because if we never had a vaccine, the death rates would be in the millions, and right now it's about 800,000, which is still a scary as all hell number. But it's slowed down the potential death from this thing, and I think that's a good thing. That's the way I look at it. The people that wore masks, the healthcare workers at the beginning, they were infected less than people that weren't wearing masks. The people that are vaccinated have a much better chance of surviving if they get this. It's just, that's all out there. That's all practical. That's why you're going to have to be very practical about this. And within these leagues don't want to have guys miss games because of COVID.
No, it's bad for business.
bad for business. I mean, and then you got Antonio Brown, who's got, falsifying his COVID vaccine card, which is just lunacy, but that's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown is the only guy, and now he's vaccinated, by the way. Antonio Brown is vaccinated. He's the only guy that got suspended 3 games while being vaccinated because he screwed up at the beginning. He's just, I mean,
if I'm Brady, I'm furious with him. If Brady stuck up for him.
Reason Brady sticks up for him, the guy is a phenomenal wide receiver. That's the only reason Brady sticks up for him. People painted, Brady's a great guy. And look, Brady may be, but Brady is interested because the guy can help him win another championship. He's a great wide receiver. If he had been the 5th wide receiver on the roster who, ran the wrong route, Brady couldn't care less about him. I mean, and that's what most people would do anyway. I mean, I think it's maybe kind of a reclamation project for Brady, but the guy is,
moral of the story, Sap. Antonio Brown, Kyrie Irving, don't tie your futures to crazy people. No. That's the moral of the story. I take it.
Nope, absolutely. Or
I think Tom Brady and Kevin Durant are on the phone today saying, "Why are we trusting these idiots?"
Yeah, I mean, the one thing is, imagine if Durant had just stayed in Golden State, though, where he was with like a great leader in Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and they would have run off God knows how many titles.
No, they wouldn't have been sick. Nobody since he's left, no team has been nearly as good as they would. Nobody would have been able to challenge them.
And if there's the one guy that can make that work, it's Steph. I mean, Durant probably would have got tired of sharing the stage at some point, and neither one would win a league MVP. Neither one would lead the league in scoring, or even But Lord, the league got lucky that Durant decided to move on, because that group was seamless. How they played basketball, it just worked better than any big 3 I have ever seen formed. Really in the history of the sport, and that thing would have went on forever. But fortunately, Durant decided to go to Brooklyn and tie his future to one Kyrie Irving, the Odell Beckham Jr. of basketball.
Or Antonio Brown of basketball, however you want to slice it.
Yeah, I could go that. But I don't think Odell Beckham and Kyrie are bad guys. Like, I think Kyrie's just a little nuts, or Odell Beckham is a drama king. But I don't think they're necessarily like bad guy. Like, we haven't.
Antonio Brown's a bad guy. He's
a bad guy. Like Kyrie's things is he just seems like he's a troll. Right. I mean,
it depends on what your definition, right? Because like Odell Beckham's committed, or sorry, not Odell Beckham. Antonio Brown has committed actual crimes.
That's what I mean. Yeah, he's like a bad
Kyrie,
guy.
But again, that makes you a bad guy. But Kyrie spreading, a lot of misinformation, in my opinion, that makes you a bad guy too.
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid if you listen to it. And then again,
criminal. I know that, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, we've never heard it. I mean, Kyrie seems like a perfect gentleman when it comes to all other stuff. I haven't heard one thing about anything along those lines.
Right. All this depends on your definition of it.
Right.
Right.
I mean, the other guy is actually committing crimes. I mean, he's, assaulting women. He's throwing
couches at police officers.
Yeah, he's throwing couches off the 8th floor and almost killing 2 kids. He's stiffing everybody when it comes to paying.
No, he's a dirtbag.
That's what I mean. I mean, these other guys are like, okay, little full of themselves, and maybe they think they're smarter than they are, but they're not bad guys. This isn't Darren Sharper or whatever his name is, the guy that's in jail for rape, who played for the Vikings. I mean, that's not what we're comparing any of that to.
I think that's fair.
To see what happens. Yeah, and then tonight too, we've got Golden State and Phoenix in the rematch from Tuesday night's game. No Devin Booker for Phoenix, but that's going to still be pretty good to watch.
Yeah, and Phoenix has a franchise best 18-game winning streak, so we'll keep an eye on that game, and then give you guys a little bit of a recap as when we get back next week, and we'll talk about the Celtics road trip out west, talk a little bit about Ime Udoka and his first 20 games as the Celtics head coach. Plenty to talk about next week. Thanks for listening to us. We are the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our socials at John Sap 25, at Jet Stryer, and you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. Thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit, and we'll talk to you guys later. See ya.